Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I never thought I'd have to prove I owned my own property, but here we are. This whole mess started about 6 months ago when I inherited my grandfather's cabin up in the mountains. It's not some fancy vacation home, just a solid little place he built back in the 1950s when you could still buy land for practically nothing. My grandfather was what you might call obsessively organized. Every receipt, every permit, every tax payment going back 70 years was filed away in this massive fireproof safe he kept in the basement. When I inherited the place, I spent weeks going through all his documentation. Original deed from 1954, survey maps, property tax records, building permits, septic system inspections, well water tests, you name it. I even found the receipt for the nails he used to build the front porch. The man kept everything. I'd been working on fixing the place up for about 3 years, nothing fancy, just making it livable again. New roof, updated electrical, fixed the plumbing. I had every receipt organized in what I called my property binder, because apparently I inherited more than just the cabin from my grandfather. Every contractor invoice, every permit application, every interaction with the county was documented and filed away. The cabin sits on about 40 acres of mostly wooded land, about an hour drive from the nearest town on some pretty rough back roads. It's quiet, peaceful, and exactly the kind of place you go to get away from the world's craziness. Or so I thought. I drove up there on a Friday afternoon in late October, planning to spend the weekend winterizing the place before the first snow. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was wrong. There was a piece of paper taped to my front door, and when I got closer, I realized my lock had been changed. The paper was titled Notice of Fee Schedule in some fancy Gothic font. It was full of bizarre language about interaction fees and trespass penalties, and something about the living soul claiming allodial title to the property. At the bottom, it was signed with what looked like a thumbprint in red ink next to the name Reginald of the family name redacted living soul, not a corporate fiction. I was still standing there trying to make sense of this nonsense when I heard footsteps crunching through the leaves behind me. I turned around to see a guy in his 40s walking out of the woods wearing what looked like a tactical vest with no actual armor in it. He was holding a GoPro camera and pointing it right at me. "You are currently trespassing on the allodial title of the living soul Reginald," he announced in this overly official tone. "This land has been reclaimed under maritime law after being abandoned by the corporate fiction known as the previous occupant." I just stared at him. In all my years of dealing with difficult people, I'd never encountered anything quite like this. He continued talking into his camera about how I was now subject to his fee schedule and owed him $500 per hour for interacting with his person. He handed me a manila envelope that felt surprisingly heavy. Inside was a 15-page document covered in gold leaf seals, red wax stamps that looked like they came from a craft store, and page after page of the most incomprehensible legal-sounding gibberish I'd ever seen. There were references to the corporation of state name, something about strawman accounts, and multiple mentions of maritime law applying to land somehow. The whole thing was signed with more red thumbprints and included what he called his schedule of fees. According to this document, looking at him cost $50, speaking to him was $200 per word, and stepping on his property was $5,000 per footstep. At the bottom, he'd included a mailing address to a P.O. box in town. "I see," I told him, keeping my voice as calm as possible. "I'll let the proper authorities review your maritime claim." He seemed pretty pleased with himself as I walked back to my truck. Through my rearview mirror, I could see him filming another video, probably explaining to his audience how he'd successfully claimed property from another corporate fiction. The drive to the sheriff's station gave me time to think. I'd heard about these sovereign citizen types on the news, but I'd never actually encountered one. From what I remembered, they had some pretty bizarre ideas about how the law worked and weren't exactly known for responding to reason. Sheriff Martinez had been dealing with people like Reginald for years. When I showed up with my property deed and the bizarre documents I'd been handed, he just shook his head and sighed. "We've had 3 calls about this guy in the past month," he told me. "He's been trying to claim abandoned properties all over the county. Problem is, we need him to actually commit a crime we can prove before we can do anything about it." I spread out Reginald's paperwork on the sheriff's desk. "Well, he did break my lock and change it. That's got to be breaking and entering at least." "Did you see him do it?" No, but he's admitted to taking possession of the property, and I've got his whole fee schedule thing here with his real name and mailing address. The sheriff looked through the documents more carefully. You know what? This might actually work in our favor. He's put everything in writing. Let me make some copies of this stuff. What happened next was probably the most satisfying example of malicious compliance I've ever been involved in. Since Reginald had declared in his own paperwork that my property was abandoned and unowned, I filed for an emergency injunction for property seizure and criminal trespass. The beauty of Reginald's own documentation was that he'd essentially created evidence against himself. His fee schedule proved premeditation. His claim that the property was abandoned was easily disproven by my tax records showing I'd been paying property taxes for 3 years. His admission that he'd reclaimed the property was basically a confession to trespassing and breaking and entering. While I was at the courthouse filing paperwork, Reginald was apparently having the time of his life back at my cabin. According to the sheriff, who drove by to check on the situation, he was moving my furniture out onto the porch and filming videos about his new ministry headquarters. The legal wheels started turning faster than I expected. Within 2 days, I had official court papers to serve Reginald, and since he'd been thoughtful enough to include his mailing address in his fake legal documents, service was going to be straightforward. But before we could serve him officially, something even better happened. Reginald made the mistake of posting his videos online, including footage of him breaking my lock and moving my property. He'd filmed his own crimes and posted them to social media with captions about liberating abandoned corporate property. Sheriff Martinez called me on Tuesday morning. Your boy just made this a lot easier for us. He posted video evidence of breaking and entering, theft and destruction of property. We're heading out there this morning to arrest him. I asked if I could tag along, and the sheriff said as long as I stayed in the truck and didn't interfere, he didn't see why not. The arrest was almost anticlimactic. We pulled up to find Reginald sitting on my porch filming another video about sovereign citizen rights. The moment he saw the sheriff's car, he jumped up and started his routine. I do not consent to any interaction with corporate enforcers, he announced to his camera. Am I being detained? I demand to see your oath of office. Sheriff Martinez just walked right up to him. Reginald, you signed documents claiming this land was unowned and abandoned. Here's a deed from 1954 and tax records from the past 3 years proving otherwise. Since you filmed yourself breaking the lock on the front door, that's burglary. Reginald tried to hand the sheriff a piece of paper. I am fining you $1 million in silver bullion for violating my person without my consent. The sheriff actually laughed. Sir, you're under arrest for burglary, criminal trespass, and theft. You have the right to remain silent, though you probably should have started exercising that right about a week ago. The whole arrest was captured on Reginald's own GoPro, which the sheriff confiscated as evidence. As they loaded him into the patrol car, he was still trying to argue that maritime law superseded state criminal statutes and that the sheriff's badge wasn't valid because it wasn't made of gold. The aftermath was where things got really interesting from a legal perspective. Reginald's public defender tried to argue that his client had a genuine belief that he was operating within some alternative legal framework, but the prosecutor had Reginald's own documents working against him. The judge was clearly familiar with sovereign citizen nonsense. During the hearing, Reginald tried to argue that he wasn't subject to the court's jurisdiction because he hadn't consented to being governed. The judge simply pointed out that Reginald's own fee schedule proved he understood the concept of legal consequences for actions, and his detailed documentation showed clear premeditation. Mr. Reginald, the judge said, you can't claim to be outside the law when it's convenient and then create your own legal documents when you want to steal someone's property. That's not how any of this works. The prosecutor used Reginald's schedule of fees to demonstrate criminal intent. If he truly believed he had legitimate claim to the property, why would he need to create a fee structure for interactions? The whole thing was clearly designed to intimidate people into abandoning their legitimate property claims. Reginald was ultimately convicted on multiple charges: burglary for breaking the lock, theft for taking my property, criminal trespass for occupying my land without permission, and destruction of property for the damage he'd caused moving my furniture around. The restitution hearing was particularly satisfying. The judge ordered him to pay for a new lock, professional cleaning and restoration of the cabin, repairs to the furniture he'd damaged, and court costs. When Reginald tried to pay his fines with what he called gold credits and silver certificates he'd printed at home, the judge made it clear that real money was required. Your sovereign currency is not accepted in this corporate court, the judge said dryly. US dollars only, please. The whole ordeal cost Reginald about $8,000 in fines and restitution, plus whatever he spent on his fancy fake legal documents. He also got 6 months in county jail, which gave him plenty of time to think about the difference between maritime law and real law. I used some of the restitution money to install a proper security system at the cabin. Motion sensors, cameras, and a gate at the end of the driveway with a very clear sign that reads private property. This property is governed by the laws of the land, not the sea. Trespassers will be prosecuted by real lawyers. But the story doesn't end there. About a month after Reginald was released from jail, I started getting more of his ridiculous paperwork in the mail. Bills for storing his energy on my property, invoices for use of his land, and threats to place liens on my property using his made-up legal authority. I brought all of this to my lawyer, who had a field day with it. Turns out that threatening to place fraudulent liens is itself a crime, and continuing to harass someone after being convicted of criminal trespass was a violation of Reginald's parole. The parole violation hearing was swift and decisive. Reginald showed up with another stack of homemade legal documents and tried to argue that he'd been acting as a private attorney general enforcing maritime law. The judge pointed out that he was a convicted felon with no legal training whatsoever, and sending threatening fake legal documents to his victims was exactly the kind of behavior that had gotten him in trouble in the first place. Back to jail he went, this time for a full year. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact between Reginald and myself, including through his bizarre pseudo-legal correspondence. My lawyer also helped me file a civil suit against Reginald for harassment, emotional distress, and the time I'd lost dealing with his nonsense. The civil case was even easier to win than the criminal case, since we had all of his documentation proving he knew exactly what he was doing. Reginald tried to represent himself in the civil case, which went about as well as you'd expect. He showed up to court with a new set of fake documents declaring that the court had no jurisdiction over him because he'd revoked his Social Security contract and was now operating as a foreign diplomat. The judge was not impressed. "Sir, you can't declare diplomatic immunity from a jail cell after being convicted of crimes in this very courthouse." The civil judgment was for $35,000, covering my legal fees, lost time, and punitive damages. Of course, collecting money from someone who believes the entire monetary system is a corporate conspiracy is easier said than done, but at least I had the legal victory. The best part came about 6 months later when I was up at the cabin for a weekend and heard someone walking around outside at night. I checked the security cameras and saw a figure in dark clothing trying to sneak around the property. For a moment, I thought Reginald was back to his old tricks, but when I called the sheriff and they showed up to investigate, it turned out to be a completely different sovereign citizen who'd apparently heard about the property from Reginald's online videos. This guy was even more prepared than Reginald had been, with a whole briefcase full of fake legal documents and a mobile ministry set up in the back of his van. Sheriff Martinez arrested him for trespassing before he could even start his routine. Apparently, Reginald had been telling other sovereign citizens that my property was prime real estate for reclamation and that all they needed was better paperwork than his to claim it successfully. The second arrest led to a wider investigation of the local sovereign citizen network. Turns out they'd been targeting remote properties all over the region looking for places they thought they could claim without much resistance. My case had become something of a cautionary tale in their community, but apparently not everyone got the message. The irony wasn't lost on me that my grandfather's obsessive record-keeping had been exactly what I needed to deal with people who thought they could ignore proper documentation. His fireproof safe full of 70-year-old paperwork had been more effective against modern criminals than any security system I could have installed. I still have all of Reginald's fake legal documents filed away in my property binder right next to the real court orders that sent him to jail. Sometimes when I'm up at the cabin and the fire's going, I'll take out his notice of fee schedule and read it for entertainment value. The whole experience taught me a lot about how these sovereign citizen types operate. They target people they think won't fight back, usually elderly folks or people who might not have clear documentation of their property ownership. They rely on confusion and intimidation, hoping their victims will just walk away rather than deal with the hassle. But when they run up against someone with proper paperwork and the willingness to use the actual legal system, their whole house of cards falls apart pretty quickly. All their talk about maritime law and corporate fictions doesn't hold up when real judges look at real evidence. The cabin has been peaceful ever since. I upgraded the security system and put up additional signs making it clear that the property is monitored and protected by actual law enforcement. The gate at the end of the driveway now requires a code to open, and I've got cameras covering every approach to the property. But more than the security measures, I think word has gotten out in whatever online communities these people use that this particular property isn't worth the trouble. My case apparently became something of a legend among local law enforcement as an example of how to properly document and prosecute sovereign citizen crimes. Sheriff Martinez told me that other property owners in the area now ask for copies of my court filings to use as templates when they encounter similar problems. The prosecutor's office has used Reginald's case as a training example for how to handle sovereign citizen legal tactics. I've even been invited to speak at a few community meetings about property security and dealing with these types of scams. It's weird being known as the guy who defeated a sovereign citizen with paperwork, but I suppose there are worse reputations to have. The whole thing reinforced something my grandfather used to tell me about the importance of keeping good records. He always said you never know when you might need to prove something, so you should document everything important as if your life depends on it. In this case, it wasn't my life that depended on it, but it was definitely my property and my peace of mind. Without those 70 years of meticulous record keeping, Reginald's nonsense might have been a lot harder to disprove. I've started keeping even better records now, if that's possible. Every interaction with contractors, every permit application, every tax payment gets documented and filed away. I even keep copies of the security camera footage just in case someone else decides to test their fake legal theories against my real legal documents. The cabin itself has never been more comfortable or secure. I finished all the renovations I'd planned, plus added a few improvements I hadn't originally considered. There's something satisfying about sitting on the porch that Reginald once tried to claim as his own, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise over land that's been properly documented as mine for 70 years. Every now and then, I'll get a weird piece of mail from some other sovereign citizen who apparently got my address from Reginald's network. Usually it's some version of his original nonsense about fees and maritime law and corporate fictions. I just forward it all to my lawyer, who adds it to the growing file of evidence in case we ever need to pursue additional harassment charges. The restraining order against Reginald is still in effect, and as far as I know, he's kept his distance since his last jail sentence. According to Sheriff Martinez, he moved to a different county and has been focusing his efforts on bothering other property owners who hopefully have better sense than to put up with his nonsense. But the system worked exactly like it was supposed to. Real documentation beat fake documentation, actual law enforcement handled actual criminals, and legitimate court proceedings resulted in appropriate consequences. It's almost like the legal system was designed to handle situations exactly like this one. The only regret I have about the whole situation is that my grandfather wasn't around to see how his obsessive record keeping saved the day. He would have gotten a kick out of watching some amateur criminal try to use fake maritime law against 7 decades of properly filed real estate documents. I think he also would have appreciated the poetic justice of Reginald's own paperwork being used against him in court. There's something fitting about a man who believed in the power of documentation being defeated by someone with better documentation. These days, the cabin is exactly what it was always meant to be, a peaceful retreat away from the world's craziness. The only difference is that now I have absolute confidence that it's legally mine, backed up by everything from 1950s deeds to modern court orders. And if any other sovereign citizens want to test their theories against my paperwork, well, I've got plenty of experience with that particular battle now. The filing cabinets are ready, the lawyers are on speed dial, and the security cameras are always rolling. But mostly, I just enjoy the quiet. It turns out that having bulletproof legal documentation is almost as relaxing as having a fireproof safe full of 70-year-old receipts. My grandfather would definitely approve. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So, with this story, we are back at the resort I worked at multiple times. I worked at this place several times, and I have to dip back into those times to explain how I got hired. When I was 15, I had originally got a job doing room service and got really good at navigating the facility. When I was 18 to 19, I started growing out my hair and would wear a headband literally 100% of the time and thought I was cool. I got a call one day from a friend and past coworker who was very tied into the resort. The dishwashing team walked out and they needed someone now. I lived 150 feet from this resort and they were giving me a guaranteed job without an interview and would pay cash until I got in the system. The catch? I had to do 3 full kitchen's dishes right now with almost zero training. I worked solidly by myself in 3 kitchens from open to close for weeks until they hired help. I lived somewhat close to the lady in charge of the entire resort who loved that I was involved with the resort. Again, she and I have always had a great friendship as neighbors. I ended up leaving to get a better paying job, which didn't really help me out because even though it was more per hour, I was working less and had to drive and spend more on gas. I got another call from that friend. I got an instant job there. Again, this time almost entire setup staff for banquets, meetings, and wedding had walked. Again, same conditions as above. I had a butt ton of work to do, but just in a different department. I had found out that the lady in charge actually suggested my friend specifically call me because I was a known reliable worker. It's at this point where this story really begins. I had long, thick hair, no more headband. I wore it in a tight ponytail that came to my mid-back. I will also mention that I am a guy. Knowing I was going to be a front-of-house employee with guest contact, I would shower before going to work and pull my hair into a tight single braid. Once in place, I would run gel in so the loose, shorter strands would stay in place. I looked professional. Because of my unusual hiring conditions, I rarely ever saw HR. After over a year of working in this department, training a whole new team, and 2 customer service awards, HR approached me. I literally had a tray of covered food on my shoulder, about to walk into a wedding. She stopped me. I saw her glance at my hair and said, "We've had several complaints about you. You need to put your hair into compliance according to the handbook by the time you show up to work tomorrow, or consider this your termination notice." She said this to me while I was absolutely slammed with work during dinner service at a 300-plus person wedding reception. Several servers were watching and gave me the appropriate "what the percent dollar at hash, who would have complained?" comforting words to myself. I put my head down and really don't remember the rest of the night. The next day I am in my kitchen with my future wife and my mother. We have the employee handbook out and are looking at it. I am due into work soon as we have to tear down the wedding from last night and reset up for a wedding reception tonight. It was determined that I needed the job more than I needed the hair, but I liked my long hair, the area of the handbook we were looking at. Male hair must be kept above collar length. Ponytails are not permitted. Well, okay, ask and you shall receive. I washed and dried my hair, went back into the kitchen where my mom had pulled out the large soup pot that fit over my head and was deep enough to stop just over my collar, and started cutting. I do not have a picture of this. But picture Edna Mode from The Incredibles, except her hair is super thick and frizzed out like the witch from the old cartoon Sword in the Stone. We all equally laughed and cried. I found it hilarious, but we all missed my hair. I go to work, in compliance, and present myself to HR. She is shocked to see me. I don't know if it was because she didn't think I'd be back, or that I literally looked like I just licked an electrical outlet. I quoted the handbook and said that we should be good now. She argued that I looked horrible. I pointed out that she shouldn't shame my looks and that I, again, was in handbook compliance and would be going to work. It was very memorable going back to work. Everyone had something to say. It had gotten around what HR had pulled, and then it had gotten around what I did. Through all the laughs that were had, we had work to do. We had to get all of last night's wedding cleaned up. The grand ballroom had to get vacuumed. The tables and chairs placed in new positions. Tablecloths in new place settings. The whole shebang. To those who have worked in this industry, I know you can visualize the amount of work. The lady who ran the resort stopped by because she always does before a reception just to make sure our standards are up. She sees me in the back hall carrying a rack of water glasses into the ballroom and yells my name. I pass off the glasses and run over. She is staring at my hair and asks, "What happened to your beautiful hair?" I explain the saga to her and see her body language change. Her lips thinned out and excuses herself. When I'm next in the hallway, my direct boss is there and hands me a hairband. I'm to put high hair in a ponytail on boss's orders. I think that's the end of it. Then I hear the rumors. She was in HR's office for an hour. HR just got walked out of the building. I never confirmed exactly what happened, but I do know the HR office was empty the next day. A few weeks later, we had a new HR lady. I found out because I saw someone new in the back halls. She approached me, held out her hat, and said, "You must be OP." Why the new HR lady knew me by name and could pick me specifically out of a crowd should have worried me. But I was young and stupid. Hair was in HR compliance for about 2 hours over the several years I works at that resort. The next one is an entitled People Story. I work with college students. Most of my day-to-day work is on campus, but occasionally I get travel opportunities to chaperone clubs and student organizations to conferences. One of these student orgs was doing a conference 2 states away from our campus, around an 8-hour drive. I was originally supposed to chaperone the trip with a colleague, but the conference didn't announce the dates until approximately a month before, and my colleague had a wedding that weekend, so it was me plus 5 students: president, vice president, PR manager, programming manager, and sustainability manager. Most of the students were seniors with a lot of experience in this org, so I figured they understood the prep work for this conference. Because there were so many of us, my boss rented us 2 cars for travel, one for me and one for the vice president. I got a Nissan Altima and VP got a Toyota Camry. Well, the prep work for this conference, and the actual conference itself, showed me these students had zero care for the club, the conference, or anything else. Just to name a few problems. I asked them to set up a pre-travel meeting before we left campus to go over expectations. They agreed multiple times, but never actually scheduled the meeting. They added an hour onto our travel time because they kept asking to stop so they could get snacks. They didn't complete any pre-conference activities. Normally, there are several small competitions to make banners and present educational sessions at the conference. Even when I reminded them multiple times, I asked them to pack some old club merch to bring to a swap shop at the conference so we could order new club merch after we returned to campus. They never packed it. They showed up late to opening ceremonies, disappeared halfway through the educational sessions of the conference to go buy souvenirs, and were late to the closing ceremonies. They claimed they didn't know that they were supposed to be somewhere even though I had sent them a digital schedule. They complained when other schools were winning awards during the closing ceremonies because they felt they deserved to win those awards, despite doing zero prep work and missing half of the conference. This was my first time chaperoning students alone, and I was struggling trying to keep a handle on them, especially with most of them being juniors/seniors who acted like they knew better than me. During all of this, I made one request. We were driving back to campus on Sunday. I had weekly plans for 6:30 p.m. on Sundays that I wanted to keep in place. Because we crossed a time zone to get to this conference, and because they added an hour onto the original travel time with all their stops, I asked if we could be ready to leave at 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. Vice President immediately started whining. "That's so early, oh my God, can't we do 7:30? I said that this was, quite literally, my one ask. They had already made me look like a fool by blowing off half of the conference. Please just be in the lobby at 7 o'clock so I can take you home. They relented. I sent a text message into the group chat reminding them of our 7 a.m. departure time and then went to bed at my old man time of 9:30. What I didn't know was immediately after I left, the vice president turned around and immediately said, "No one listened to spaghetti shoestrings. We're leaving whenever I want because I have the keys to the Camry." And basically convinced the group to go along with a 7:30 departure time. So I get up the next morning and sit in the lobby at 6:50. 7 hits and no one is here. At 7:02, I message into our group chat to see if they're awake. Programming manager immediately responds, "Be down in a minute." Still, no one shows up. By 7:10, I'm annoyed, and by 7:15, I'm fuming. I send a message basically saying, "I've been so patient with y'all all weekend, and I asked for one thing, and you couldn't even do that. I'm leaving at 7:30, not meeting you in the lobby at 7:30. Leaving, driving off the lot. So anyone who doesn't want to cram themselves into the damn Camry needs to be in the lobby in the next 5 minutes." Wouldn't you know it, suddenly president, programming manager, and PR manager are on their way. Even vice president gets down. Where is our sustainability manager? Oh, he jumped in the shower at 7:11 a.m. By this point, I'm starting to get filled in by the president on what happened the night before. She told me about how the vice president said that she would text me to let me know of the new plans. No one had ever texted me. I looked at the vice president and told her that, since she has the keys to the Camry and she wanted to stay longer so bad, she can drive everyone except the president and all their stuff. They'll have to wait for sustainability manager to get out of the shower, and I'm leaving now. They can catch up and we'll meet for lunch at some point. Then I left. Fun fact, the Camry was smaller than the Altima, and the students were uncomfortable enough with 3 of them in the car together for the drive to the conference, but now they'll have to fit an additional person because they just kept trying to push my limits. Was it the most responsible thing of me to leave 5 students alone in a separate state while I was technically supposed to be chaperoning them? Perhaps. But I didn't call anyone to check. So I drove off the lot at 7:29 a.m., and I made it to my 6:30 plans that night. And I recruited an entirely new executive board for the next year that are much more excited about actually doing their jobs. The next one is an entitled People Story.
I work as a vocational rehabilitation counselor. Essentially, it's helping people with disabilities find funds or accommodations for work, school, training, transport, etc. While introverted, I generally like working with people, and when I've had enough and need to recharge my social battery, I can shut the door and the office is quiet, despite the walls being paper thin. Here comes, we'll call her Barb, who is loud. A yell talker. She's also smothering, kind of condescending, talks loudly to herself constantly, and just generally rubs me the wrong way. Whatever, she's harmless, right? I keep a glass dish full of candy on my desk that is for any clients, coworkers, custodial staff, whoever. I am not reimbursed for this, I just like being nice. Plus, it allows me to be friendly without having to be very social. It makes a crappy day better when I see a coworker stop by for a piece of chocolate or a lifesaver and cheer themselves up. Most people take a few, I don't care, but Barb completely and absolutely abused it. She regularly picks out all the red lifesavers for herself, as well as the Dove milk chocolates. And I mean all. She would take upwards of 10 pieces a day every time she's here. Only 2 to 3 times a week, thankfully, of each. Now it's too far because it ducks everyone else over, including my clients. I started leaving some on her desk specifically for her to try to alleviate the problem. It kind of did, for a little bit, until a couple of weeks ago when I had to go home sick with a migraine around noon. I came back the next day and found my candy dish absolutely ravaged, and every single red lifesaver in Dove Square had been taken, leaving behind mostly other flavors and some Hershey Kisses. That idiot. I did the math and realized she had eaten about $9 worth of my candy in a matter of 3 weeks, and never offered to repay or refill it. She also sucks on them very loudly and smacks her mouth almost violently. So, I decided on the days she's in, suddenly the dish is only filled with everything but the red lifesavers and Dove. She's been rifting through the dish since, disappointed. I put them back out when she's gone. I think my coworkers have already noticed, since now they seem to stop by more on those days too. Super petty, but I don't care. Selfish a-holes don't get enabled to screw over everybody else. Not if I can help it. The next story is titled, Got Revenge on an Abuser. One Friday night, I went to a party. I talked about a girl I met on the beach while I was walking my dog. One girl was very drunk and said, "Is she fat?" She doesn't usually fat shame people, but I invited her to softball and she was making a stupid joke. To which I said, "No, she's chubby, but cute. I like chubby girls." A guy, Dick, overheard me and thought I called his girlfriend fat. I don't know how such a big miscommunication could happen, but it did. I didn't know this, and 2 days later, Sunday, we had a softball game. I didn't play, but while walking out, Dick ran up to me, said my name, and swung at the side of my head, and I went flying. Just for perspective, I'm 5'9", 115 pounds. Dick worked out, was 6 foot or over, and probably double my weight. My glasses broke, my tooth was chipped, etc. I was scared and didn't know what reason he would punch me over, as I never had interactions with him. I ran away, called the cops later. They are dragging their feet, saying they can't find him, but I want the money for my damages. It has been 6 months. I even had an eyewitness go to the station and make a statement. I asked Dick for the money, and I said I don't want anything fancy, just my glasses replaced. Dick said he'd give me an apology, but no money. Even though he did it in front of 15 people, so he's not denying he punched me, he's telling other people still that I called his girlfriend fat. He was not part of that conversation, but 5 people who were all say I didn't call his girlfriend fat or even talk about her, so that's only his opinion. So basically, only he, of all the people there, thinks I called his girlfriend fat. He also admits to hitting me, although he's told people it was open hand, even though many witnesses claim otherwise. He still won't pay for the damages he caused. So, cue revenge time. I live in a US territory. This territory is not a fan of mainlanders coming in and acting like they own the place. 6 months after the altercation, he started posting pro-mainlander stuff and is trying to be the face of why mainlanders are good for the territory. Also, insulting a local journalist. So, I knew there was a very strong movement against this, and after putting up his videos for a week, he got tons of hateful comments. So I messaged some of these people and gave them the police reports, chat logs, etc., and now he basically has an army of locals who hate outsiders trying to expose him. He also doesn't seem to be afraid. He has everything on his Facebook profile public. I had a hunch and messaged his ex. She said he was abusive, so I have a lot of dirt to expose him with. Except, I'm just passing the information along to the people who want to do it. The next story is titled, Peeping Lady Neighbor Gets Flashed. So, many moons ago, I moved into an apartment, 2nd floor. At the time, I was about 21, and I'm a guy. Nice place and decent part of town. Not long after I moved in, I noticed one of my 2nd floor neighbors kept trying to investigate my living room, through, around, any way possible past my curtains. I need to tell the layout of the apartment before I go any further. From front to back, I had a sunroom, fully inside the house, but windows everywhere in this room that gets a lot of light, and faces the street and neighbors across the street, church, and church parking lot where we all parked for street cleaning. Past the sunroom was the living room. From there, into the kitchen, then to the hallway which leads to the bathroom and both bedrooms, master bedroom being the last room in the back that also leads to a porch for our apartment. So, back to the story. I would always be nice to anyone and would chat here and there with most of the neighbor ladies, which were all nice. All except for one. She thought she was the queen of the street and had to know what everyone was doing at any time. She would constantly try to look through my windows to see what was going on in my apartment. She was about 65 years old or so. I would always see her craning her neck and head around to see into my apartment. I would try to ask her to stop, but she would never answer her door. Finally, after about 6 months of this, I decided to give her something to look at. So, one morning, I got a shower, put on a robe, and went out to the sunroom. I always had the curtains closed at night, and if I was undressed. I looked around the street, and everywhere I could see to make sure no one was out and looking, but mainly wanted to make sure she was trying to investigate my house. There she was, craning her neck, trying to look through my closed curtains. Me, still having my robe around me, opened the curtains, saw her again, trying to investigate my apartment, opened my robe in full view in the middle of that window. I thought she had a heart attack since her face contorted and she grabbed her chest, lol. Of course, her being a Karen called the cops to try to get me arrested. Well, the cops show up at her place, then come over to mine. I had gotten dressed by this time, so went downstairs to open the door and talk to them since I already knew what it was about. Cop 1. Yeah, we got a report of you standing naked in front of your window? Me. Yeah, wanna know why? I'll tell ya. Ever since I moved into my apartment, that old hag has been damn near breaking her neck to try to investigate my apartment every day. Me and my roommate have tried to ask her to stop, but she never answers her door. I finally got tired of her being a peeping Tom and gave her something to look at. And before you say anything, no one else was around when I did it. It's not my fault her 65-year-old ass can't handle seeing what I have. Cop 1 and 2 laughing their asses off. Cop 1 trying to catch his breath. Okay. I'll go talk to her and tell her that she can be arrested for peeping and making a false report. Do you want to press charges? Me. Nah, I think she learned her lesson. But if she didn't, she'll get it again. But next time, it'll be a little more than she is going to bargain for. Cop 1 and 2. Laugh again. Just make sure no one's around you if you must do that again. They left, walked across the street, and about 10 minutes later they left, still laughing. She never tried to investigate my house again. Yes, this happened, and yes, I did that. I have nothing to hide and don't really care. If you want to break your neck to investigate my house like you think you can, then don't be surprised at what you see, and don't complain about what you see when I finally get tired of that and I flash you stark-ass naked.
The next story is titled, Evil X Tried to Outrun Bills.
A little over 30 years back, I was just out of an abusive relationship. I was 20, he was a decade older, and he was a human leech. He lived off me, and occasionally my parents, for a year. When I finally told him to go away, he broke into my apartment, threw me into a wall, and tried to take my cat. He was truly vile. Shortly after I was shed of him, I took a job as a receptionist with a bill collector agency. This was when computers were first beginning to be used. I was told there were boxes of bills in the back that hadn't been entered as they had gone into collection before the computers were installed. They weren't so old as to be uncollectible, but they weren't the priority. Knowing what a deadbeat he was, I used a lunch hour one day to look. Sure enough, he had more than $10,000 total in bills from a dozen different businesses. So I entered them all into the computer with his current contact information, including the jobs he was working where he was being paid under the table. I assigned it to the agency's most aggressive collector. He even let me listen in on the first call he made to the guy. It was immensely satisfying. And even better was a few months later when the ex left town to go live with his sister. The next story is titled 2 Short Stories of My Family's Revenge. My grandfather was a World War II veteran and a high school chemistry teacher. He had another teacher ask to borrow $500 back in the 70s. Later, when the payment was past due and the guy seemed like he was ghosting him, my grandfather showed up at the school with a cherry picker and pulled that dude's engine out. He came out to start his car, popped his hood, and was horrified to find his engine gone. My grandfather said, "When you pay me back, you'll get your engine back." And he did. I had a great uncle that was a penny pincher and was the type of man to store his cash in the walls. He went to a Cadillac dealership to buy a car and walked around for nearly an hour without being waited on by a single salesman. He then walked across the street to a Buick dealership and a salesman ran up to him and greeted him. My uncle then said, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to buy 2 Buicks cash today, but you've got to run across the street and let them know how they lost out on a sale." This kinda reminds me of the scene in Pretty Woman. Moral of the story, hardworking men don't always dress nice. The next story is titled, "Sure, you can redeem your lottery ticket in 5s. This is possibly the tiniest petty revenge ever. I work at the East Coast's favorite goose-themed convenience store, and I was helping on the register. A middle-aged man goes to hand me his lottery voucher, and as I went to take the ticket from him, he snatched it back and quite aggressively said, "I want this in 5s. "Sure, you'll get your $50 in 5s, no problem." So I scanned his ticket and then proceeded to count out $50 in 5s from the register as slowly as I could. Usually when counting out a lottery cash out for somebody, I count it once again in front of the customer so we both know that I'm giving them the right amount. And that's exactly what I did. Slower than the first. Duck you and your 5s. I hope this brings a smile to all my fellow cashiers. The next story is titled, "I'm Not Proud." I had this younger guy I fell absolutely in love with. We never met in person, which should have been my first clue because we lived in the same town. He acted like he was into me, and that he wanted to meet. We had been talking for months. And during those months, we would talk dirty on the phone. I would send him nudes and videos daily, because I foolishly thought he cared about me like I did him. Well, one day I go to talk to him and I'm blocked. I also learn he has a girlfriend, who he had been seeing while I was sending stuff. So essentially, I was being used for free porn. I was devastated. I decided if he wanted nudes, he'll get more nudes. So I posted his snap on every single gay subreddit I could find. I would talk to these guys, getting them all turned on, then send his snap. I guess he started getting dozens, then hundreds of dick pics and loads of cumshot videos. He unblocked me just to yell at me because it had to be me. I denied it and blocked him, and continued to share his snap for days until I got over it. The only thing I feel bad for is the gay men who got catfished and led on. The last story is titled, "Rotten Meat Deserved a Lipstick." Lately, I recalled other stories from a recently deceased family member. As she can't tell it to anyone anymore, I thought I would share it. 3 kids who are still alive don't matter in this story, so I mention only the ones who matter. No dialogue, I wasn't born back then, and Auntie didn't recall any to tell me. She was a young mom then, and told me this as an old granny. During the 1960s, this lady, let's call her Auntie, had 4 kids and a husband. They were buying fast food from a stall in town, as kids were hungry and they still had a long time before getting home. These stalls were like metal carriages, easily moved around with a car, and had a window for selling food items. The youngest kid, I recall then 4 years old, had trouble eating the hot snack, a grilled sausage. Others ate fast and noticed he had only taken 1 bite. Auntie asked him what's the matter, and the little kid said it tastes bad. Auntie tasted it, and the sausage was rotten. They turned around, having only walked a few feet away from the stall, but the metal window was closed. Auntie's husband started banging the closed window, yelling that his son got a rotten sausage. Not a peep from inside. Now, Auntie believed that the guy selling food did this on purpose, getting rid of the rotten meat products by giving them to children not old enough to tattle. Auntie wasn't one to value makeup, but as her husband sure was, she had a bright red lipstick in her handbag. So, after trying to get the guy to just grill a good sausage for the boy with no success, Auntie went petty, took her lipstick and wrote with huge letters, "This place sells rotten meat," right to the metal covering before they left. They weren't well off, so the little boy didn't get anything to eat before they got home, but Auntie was glad he didn't get ill from the 1 bite he took. The owner of the food stall painted the metal, but a greasy red lipstick text was still visible. All the people in this story have passed, so I'm comfortable telling their story after hearing it at least once a month for over 10 years.
The next one is an entitled People Story.
Last year, my partner of many years, who I was ready to propose to and marry, and one of our good friends started getting far closer than I was really comfortable with during a period I was working long and hard to provide for us. She started getting distant, and they were cozying up. Eventually, they tried to guilt me into accepting a polyamorous relationship, which I wasn't cool with, and when I ultimately put my foot down on the idea, she ended up choosing them over me. My ex tried to turn the entire friend group against me, which didn't work, but did scar me mentally. And I found out a lot of other terrible things she had been doing, like using my money for parties or spending it on her now current partner/ex-friend. She consistently trashed me on social media when I never talked bad about her, even after all the hurt and pain I went through. I went through a massive depressive episode that I'm still struggling with today, losing my business, sanity, and even my human will to live. It was the darkest time in my life for this and some other reasons, but I kept reminding myself that I have to outlive my enemies. And a life well lived is the best revenge one can have. So I set the plan in motion. There is a very famous DJ my ex had a huge tattoo for and absolutely loves more than anything, besides Molly, probably. And her new partner is a massive fan as well. I believe they even traveled to go see said artist recently. Travel was our big thing I got her into. And while I had this plan for a while, I kicked into overdrive and finally got it done after finding that out. I worked many years as a videographer/photographer in the touring music world. It was the dream that I eventually gave up being at home for, and focused on building our relationship more as I got older. During my career, I worked with some decently known artists, and built a few important connections. I opened up my old contacts list and went down the rabbit hole until I was able to get in contact with the DJ's team and get set up to be paid handsomely for doing tour work, running fan meetups, managing their Instagram content, etc. My work and name will be promoted all over their socials for my ex and her partner to see, and you best believe I'll be taking plenty of selfies. And while my original motivation was pure spite, I am super excited to be following my dreams again and getting another opportunity to be a creative. Plus, meeting so many amazing new people on the road again. The next story is titled, "After Insulting My Team and Myself, You Want Me to Help Tie Your Pool to the Car?" In college, I used to work part-time at a popular retail chain in Canada. Let's call it Canadian Fire. One very, very hot summer Saturday, we had a run-on pool. Everyone and their brother wanted something they could fill with water to sit in, and the rush started at 8 a.m. As you can imagine, the hard plastic cheap pools were flying off the shelves, starting with the first customer through the door. Like any college kid, I was hungover from the night before and just trying to make it through the day. My girlfriend at the time was a cashier, and she suggested we get a kiddie pool to sit in when we got off work later that night. So I snagged one of the last pools and was dragging it to the back to keep until my lunch when I could buy it. A customer, let's call him Hugh Jass, saw me grabbing the last pool and demanded I bring it back so that he can purchase it. I told him no, I was setting it aside for myself, and there were plenty of those pools in a box he was more than welcome to purchase. Well, Hugh went bananas, started swearing, cussing, and yelling for a manager. Finally, the manager on duty heard the noise, came over, and very begrudgingly told me the customer was entitled to the pool because I hadn't purchased it yet. I get it, and up until this point I was mad, mostly because I couldn't chill with my girl in her bikini, drinking beer in the pool, but in this case the customer was right. And then it happened. The customer looked at me, smiled a Cheshire Cat smile, and said, "The customer is always right, which is why you work here and I don't." I saw red, but with my manager there, I couldn't say much. Hugh then looked me dead in the eye and said, "I bet you want to help me carry this out to my car and tie it to my roof." So, I stifle my anger and carry Hugh's pool out to his car. Here comes the petty revenge. I asked Hugh to please get in the car and put all the windows down so that I can safely tie the pool to his roof. I take some of that really strong twine you use for packing and proceed to wrap the pool with twine through the windows, all four, and secure the pool to the roof. As I tied the last knot, real knots, nothing easy to undo, Hugh looks at me and says, "Don't feel badly, I always win," as he drives off. I wish I was there when Hugh Jass got home and tried to open his car doors, only to find I tied all four of them shut. Not sure how his very large frame was ever able to get out of the car, but every time I see a car with something tied to its roof, I wonder if someone else just got their petty revenge. The next story is titled, "HOA towed my classic car and chopped down my trees." I got the HOA disbanded. I want to start off by saying I am not the kind of person that usually gets aggressive or even upset. When the HOA pushed me to the point I was determined to get them disbanded, you can imagine that they finally crossed a big line. I was raised in a world where I had to work hard or I wasn't going to get anywhere in my life. My family didn't have a ton of money, but from them I got a strong sense of moral values and knowledge of hard work. Through high school, I found myself mowing lawns in order to afford to send in college applications. The hard work paid off when I graduated from law school and knew I could enjoy my life in a way I never could as a child. I got a home in a nice neighborhood, and I didn't know much about what an HOA was in my personal life. I loved my property, and it had some of my favorite looking trees in the world, dogwoods, that would bloom beautifully in the spring. Besides a house, I wanted to buy myself something really special that I had always wanted. An old classic car that I would see in car shows and dream about sitting inside of one day. I got it. And while it needed a little bit of work and love, I was happier than I had ever been before in my life. Leave it to the HOA to jump in and start raining on my parade. It wasn't even anything major at first, just small problems that they wanted to complain about. They told me that I had to take care of my weeds and that my mailbox needs to be closed at all times. They even told me that my door couldn't be painted red, which made no sense since I had a black door. Also, they complained the paint job on my house was cracking and insisting that I pay to get it redone so that the neighborhood looks nice. It wasn't a cheap thing to do, and gave me a bad taste in my mouth. The letters never stopped about these small petty things, but I didn't want to start a fight. I complied the best I could and hoped that they would just back off. The next letter I got was one telling me two things. I'll just talk about them one at a time so there isn't any kind of confusion. The first thing was that the dogwood trees had to go because they didn't look good. It wasn't spring, so they weren't in bloom and pretty anymore. I was upset about this, but decided that over the weekend I would find somebody to come and take the trees out. The HOA sent a group the next morning to start ripping out my trees, and I was angry with the nerve they had to do this to me. They had been walking all over me, and I had had it from them. Backing up a little bit, the other thing in the letter was telling me I couldn't park my classic car in the driveway because they said it looked like a piece of junk and was bothering everybody. Between the disrespect and sending people to take down my trees, I was fully angry. I was going to get my revenge, and while the type of law I studied had nothing to do with HOAs, I went and looked up as much as I could. Getting rid of an HOA wasn't the easiest thing in the world, and unless it happened internally, the only sure way that I found was if the majority of the neighborhood voted for them to disband. I had set up my plan and was getting the ball rolling by putting on a nice suit and going around the neighborhood to talk to people. I wanted to find out, first of all, if anybody else was getting harassed by the HOA, or if it was only me. I was happy by the sheer amount of people that didn't slam the door in my face and instead talked to me. I heard some horror stories similar to mine and that most people were fed up with them. I asked if they could get rid of the HOA, would they? And most said they would love to not live in an HOA. They didn't know the laws, and I told them before inviting them to come to the next meeting where I would be initiating a vote. I did make one fatal flaw, and that was not putting my classic car into a place with a lock for safekeeping. While I was out rallying against the HOA, they had towed my car illegally off of my property. I was lucky enough that one call to the towing company and I was able to get my car back before anything had happened, and store it in my garage away from the HOA. My plan was in place to take them down, and the day of the next HOA meeting, so many people came that they had to change the venue location. Usually, very few people show up to these meetings, and in a neighborhood of only about 50 homes, everybody showing up meant it was a little crazy. The meeting went, I guess, like a normal one, until it was asked if anybody had new business to bring up. I stood right up and said that I wanted to put the HOA being disbanded to a vote. The board members actually laughed in my face and told me to sit down. I pulled out my folder and stated the law right to them, giving them no choice but to allow for the vote. It was long, and each household had to be accounted for. Those that didn't show up to vote basically gave the HOA a vote to stay how it was. At the end, though, 35 of 50 properties decided that we would be better off without an HOA existing. They wanted to argue again that the only thing we could do was actually elect a new president if we disagreed with the HOA. They wanted to play that kind of game with me, and it was okay because I had studied for every single curveball they might have thrown my way. They knew they were wrong, but fighting it would take time and money. Instead, I said that I was running for president, and since I got more votes than the current one, I was elected in. Then, as my first and only act as HOA president, I shut down the HOA from the inside. At that point, nobody could actually stop it. Being raised to work hard taught me to also think outside the box, which is what ended up taking them down in the end. For an HOA to start over in our neighborhood, they would need to go through an entire process and get 50% approval rating again. I don't think that's going to happen for a while. In the meantime, I can finally enjoy my house and car without being harassed about everything. Plus, if I really wanted to, I could put on my resume that I was president of the HOA, and just not mention how long that actually lasted. They tried to abuse their power, and instead ended up losing everything to a man that they had just pushed over the edge. I even repainted my door red just so I can laugh in their faces about now getting to do anything I wanted with my house. The next story is titled, "If You Don't Like It Here, Find a Job and Move Out." 2.5 years back, I, 20 at the time, non-binary, was still living with my parents. I'm a full-time bachelor's student. I started university right after high school at the age of 18. My mother and I got into a fight. I don't remember for what exactly. In the heat of the fight, she said, "If you don't like it here, find a job and move out." Enter here, malicious compliance. Within a month, I found a job and moved out with my significant other, 19 at the time, non-binary. Ever since, my mother has been demanding for me to come over at my parents' place once a week, every week. Today, I live with now my fiance, our cat, and my service dog in the same place we moved out originally those years ago. My mother has become more careful with her words towards me. The last story is titled, "You Talk Trash Behind My Back, You Fail Your Exams." First of all, English is not my first language, so please be gentle with me. When I was 17, I was the typical outsider in class. Most of my school days in high school, I was bullied and/or alone. Therefore, my self-esteem and confidence were at an all-time low. The only thing I was confident in was my ability to learn. After my high school days, I wanted to change, and so I went to a business school. I wanted a clear start, at a place where nobody would know me and my past. There, I met Mary, 17W. She was the exact opposite of me, and out of all people in class, she talked to me. Excited was an understatement for the feelings I had at that time. I thought that would be the typical story of an extrovert that picked up the introvert. Boy, was I wrong. Our little friend group got bigger when Celine, 17W, from our class, and Christine, 17W, from my Spanish classes joined us a little later. Midterms came, and it doesn't look good for Mary. She almost fails most of them. So we made a little study group with Mary, Christine, and me. Celine worked most of the time for a burger place after school, and had good grades, so she passed. Mary slowly but surely got better grades, and we all had a good time. Mary also visited me at my parents' place, and all things were good. 6 months before our final exam, I got sick for 3 days, and Celine and Mary were alone in school. When I was in school again, Mary got sick, and Celine told me that Mary told her that she only befriended me because I was smart and some other things about my home and family. After that, I was devastated. But I made my mind up for my revenge plan. Mary told me that she met her new boyfriend at a party, therefore she doesn't have much time for our study group left. Every time when she has time, however, I was unavailable, so she and Christine studied alone. Christine was okay without me, she had much better grades than Mary. Mary's grades dropped fast. Final exams come and go, and Mary fails all her exams. When she got her grades, she looked me in the eyes, and I smiled. She knew what I did, and she leaves furious. The good thing was that I learned how to be confident and talk more to people. Also, I met my best friend Marina only half a year later. We have our 13th anniversary together this year.
The next one is an entitled People Story.
I was looking for a second fridge, and found one on Marketplace for a price I could live with. Drove out to see it. It was clean, and the guy showed me that it worked, so I paid him and took it home. Stupid me. Just because it turns on when it's plugged in doesn't mean it works. I asked if he'd give half my money back. I figured there wasn't much chance he'd say yes, but I'm willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. Of course, he blocked me. I'm not interested in a broken fridge. So I borrowed my friend and his truck a second time, loaded the fridge up, and returned it to this dude's house at about 1 a.m. We wedged that thing right up against his front door and left. The next story is titled, Force Me to Accept to Give My Business Away to Someone Else? It'll hit you in the pocket in a way that you will never expect. Around 15 years ago, I took on a hotel. I'd seen this hotel on the street that I owned a bar be massively underused, and basically be an overflow hotel for when a local chain was full during peak summer season. It was basically empty for 46 weeks of the year, and I let my interest in it be known should it ever become available. Years later, I'd kind of forgotten that I'd even said anything to the owner, but they hadn't forgotten, and the large hotel chain pulled out from their contract, and now with only a few weeks until the summer season starting, they now had an empty property with no tenant and no income. I managed to negotiate a very good price for year one, as I'd have to throw money at the place to get it ready, and I'd still lose a few weeks of the summer with all my best efforts. And then a reasonable rent for 3 more years with a renewing clause that they assured me would be honored. Basically, if I wanted to continue, they would simply let the contract roll on. They said that as long as I was happy and the rent was being paid, that's all they cared about. They said they were happy with the rent I was paying and all seemed fine. I gutted every bedroom. New wiring, lights, power switches, bedding, curtains, all cosmetic stuff to make it nice to look at. I also repainted every room. The walls hadn't been painted in what looked like at least a decade, and some of the walls were so rotten that I had to scrape so many back and treat them before I could paint them again. I basically gave the whole place a facelift. I did it all on a small budget and called in every favor I could. I worked 20 hours a day for weeks while still operating another business, a bar, on the same street. Eventually we opened, and it was a hit. I was able to make a nice profit in year 1 and have money to reinvest and remodel the hotel even more for year 2. I installed new aircon, converted the bar downstairs into a coffee shop, and year 2 was better than year 1. It was at this point the owner decided to break the contract. He had received a much better offer from another chain hotel again. He had realized that I had taken his piece of shit falling apart hotel and made it much better, and now he wanted to cash in on all my work. His exact words were, "I'm not going to renew the contract in 2 years' time." So basically, I could accept his offer to me now. He owned a bar that wasn't working, and he wanted me to come in as his owner/partner to make it work at no cost to me if I walked away from the hotel. Or if I saw out the contract, I would be given no offer of any sort, and he said he would actively work against me for those 2 years as well. So I was basically given an offer I couldn't refuse. I was paid to leave, and received a shareholding in a bar at no cost to me. Sounds reasonable, I suppose, but I was still bitter that I was being made to take it whether I wanted to or not. I had put so much hard work into that hotel after all. I couldn't let him get away with how he went about it, could I? Cue petty revenge. This was a 30-bedroom hotel, 80 beds. I went around every single room and removed all but 3 of the 7 bed slats on every bed. The mattresses were held up and in place, but anything more than lightly sitting on the bed on the exact point of a slat, and you'd fall through the bed and onto the floor below. So the new hotel chain took over, changed the name, and basically opened my hotel as it was. As a chain, they were busy immediately. After only 3 days, they were closed again and had a delivery of 80 new bed frames. Owner was made to pay for them, as he had signed a contract to say that he was providing a hotel in perfect condition, and he had assumed that's how I'd have left it for him. I had not. To this day, he has never said a word to me about it. He just ate the bill and said nothing. But we both know that I got my revenge. Further info. He was an awful partner, and after I had made his bar work, he forced me out of there too, but with no offer of anything this time. During COVID, he went bankrupt, as all his businesses were hospitality-based and they all had to close. The next story is titled, Make Me Smell Your Cigs and I'll Just Make Sure You Never Sleep Well. So, my apartment complex has a no smoking within like 50 feet of the building rule, and it's usually followed well. My downstairs neighbors have decided that they can bother that tiny amount and must smoke on their balcony, so anyone near them can't have a window or anything open without the smell filling their apartment. I have asked them 3 times now to not do this, or at least if they need nicotine in their place, just vape, so it doesn't smell like shit. They have decided they can't handle that, and the apartment managers can't do anything without the actual apartment smelling like smoke. So, for the revenge, I've decided that every night, starting at 9 p.m., every 30 minutes I will be going over where their bedroom is and just start jumping and slamming my feet as hard as I can into the ground, making sure they will never get a good night's sleep again while living here. I have also checked the apartment rules, and while there are quiet hours, it only pertains to things like music, TV, and parties, but doesn't matter for just movement, aka I will be doing this until these people leave. The next story is titled, My Summertime Revenge. My last apartment was right in the middle of the complex, about 20 feet from the pool. Over this past summer, there were lots of issues with people staying at the pool literally all day, starting around breakfast time until 2 to 3 a.m. Lots of drugs, alcohol, fights, and loud music every freaking day and night. Cops were called nightly, a flurry of complaints went to complex management and their corporate overlords with the dismissive question mark as their helpful response. Those of us who lived around the pool were at our wits' end until I had a genius idea in late July. There was a party still raging at 1 a.m., so I set up my Bluetooth speaker under a bush, cranked the volume, pushed play, and I hit repeat. It was Baby Shark. It only took one replay to make them leave. I did it again every time a party lasted past midnight. People got the hint pretty quickly and never came back. It was glorious. The last story is titled, Karen Slaps Disabled Veteran at Mall, Calls 911 on him after getting destroyed. The story begins with me and my wife going to the mall. I don't usually go out much, but I really wanted to go to the mall and see a special exhibition. The exhibition was with vintage cars, which I loved, but first we had to go buy some things from an ailment store in the mall. For starters, let me tell you some things about me. I'm a veteran, but I'm also disabled and I have to walk around with a cane. My wife, who's been a great support for me since the beginning, always helps me get around. She is a martial arts teacher, which I find very interesting and powerful. We got to the mall and started doing our shopping as normal. Shopping was not our favorite thing to do. It was hard to move around and people were always staring. I wanted to wait for her at the exhibition for that exact reason, but I wanted to help. "Excuse me, I need help," said a female voice from behind them. "Hello," she added. I turned around and looked at the woman. She was the spitting image of what you call a Karen. Everything about her was screaming Karen. Her clothes, her hair, and also her expensive pink purse. I already knew that the conversation would be an annoying one, but I still replied. "Hello to you too. What can I help you with?" I asked, smiling. "I need help finding something in the store, of course," she replied. "I'm not an employee here, lady. I can't help you," I replied. "You think you're funny or something?" "I want to speak to your manager," she shouted. "I don't know who the manager of this place is. What is your problem?" I asked. "You cannot talk like this to your clients. Your client is your boss, and I demand respect," she said. "That might be true, but the only thing is that I don't work here," I said again. "As I said, I want to speak to your manager," she shouted. "Ma'am, I also want to speak to the one owning the psychiatric hospital you ran out of," I said, already angry. She took a few steps closer to me and slapped me as hard as she could. Then she started kicking my cane and laughing. "You know that I know this cane is fake, right?" she asked, laughing. "Disabled people don't walk around malls," she added. Karen got closer to me and started laughing harder, and because of how angry I was, I gave her a leg sweep and she fell to the ground. She quickly got up and she was ready to scream. But then she noticed that her purse got dirty with something from the floor. She started screaming louder. "I can't believe this! First you assaulted me, and then you dirty my purse," she started screaming. "This purse is more expensive than everything you've ever seen in your life," she added, pretending she was crying. "You harassed and assaulted me first," I shouted. "I told you that I don't work here, but you insisted," I added. "That's not true. You sexually assaulted me, and pushing you was self-defense," she said, and then looked at her purse. "This purse is more expensive than your house and your car altogether, old man," she added. And you think that's something to be proud of? I asked. Spending so much money on a purse? I added. Karen started hitting me with her purse, but my wife intervened. That's enough. I'm calling the police, said my wife. I thought that you'd stop, but I see that you're not going to, she added. Karen goes closer to her and starts hitting her with her purse. She pushes my wife as hard as she can, but my wife reacts. As I told you in the beginning of this story, my wife is a martial arts teacher. She started doing all kinds of tricks on Karen. I must say, I know that we shouldn't reply with violence to violence, but I'm very proud of my wife for kicking Karen's ass. Karen fell to the ground again, crying and shouting. She then takes out her phone and calls the police, stating that I sexually assaulted her and my wife beat her. Meanwhile, the manager came. Some employee who saw the scene called him. What happened here? Asked the manager. I assume you are the manager. So, let me tell you what happened. This employee of yours sexually, physically, and mentally assaulted me. And the other one, the woman, beat me, Karen shouted. First of all, this man is not my employee, said the manager. The manager was confused, looking at us and then at Karen. The story Karen told was hard to believe. My wife and I told our side of the story and how things really went. Meanwhile, the police showed up at the scene and started asking questions. Police officer, these three right here tried to assault me, shouted Karen. At first it was just these two, but the manager joined them. They assaulted me right here, and I only acted in self-defense, she said. We'll check the security cameras and see exactly what happened, said the police officer. There's no need for that. I already told you what happened. They assaulted me. You have to arrest them, added Karen. They're both employed here, and the manager is covering for them, she added. Unfortunately, lady, we can't take anyone's words as truth. We have to do our job, and if they're guilty, we'll arrest them, replied the policeman. The police checked the security cameras and they saw and heard everything that really happened. Fortunately for me and my wife, the quality of the store's security cameras was amazing, and you could also hear the conversation really well. The police knew what they were dealing with, so they went to arrest Karen. The police officer came from behind and put the handcuffs on her. She started screaming and kicking. You are under arrest for assault, false declaration, said the policeman. How is this possible? He insulted and assaulted me. The woman beat me, and they even dirtied my purse, she shouted. She continued screaming and shouting, moving aggressively, trying to escape the policeman holding her. Karen managed to break out of the policeman's arms, and she started running towards the exit. She was laughing and showing us the middle finger, but two policemen started running after her and caught her right away. Stupid move, lady, the policeman said, smiling. You just made things worse for yourself, he added. She started swearing, threatening my wife and I. We both just stared at her, not saying anything, just waiting for her to be taken away. Karen was arrested and directly taken to jail. The manager apologized to us thousands of times, offered us a discount of 60%, and gave us his personal phone number. He offered us a meal as an apology, and we talked about this and that. After that, we all went to the exhibition, and the manager paid for both our tickets, which was amazing because they were very expensive. In the end, we ended up with a fun story to tell, a discount at the mall, free entry at the exhibition, and a new friend.
The next one is an entitled People Story.
I work as a bus driver. In our company, we have more than 20 nationalities from all over the world, all religions, cultures, organizations, etc. We are all friendly and professional to each other and respect each other. Now, on our branch, there is one unbreakable rule. When you see a colleague on the road, you salute each other regardless of your KMs, age, etc. Except for one guy. Let's call him Jacob. Jacob is of a usual race, nationality, religion combo. I am Caucasian European, and Jacob has assumed that I follow a specific religion that historically isn't on the best terms with his. I'm an atheist. Jacob never salutes. And by never, I mean he doesn't talk to me at all. He completely ignores my existence in any case. Garage, station, hotel, launch room, etc. I always say hi, smile, and salute on the road. On convos with others, I've expressed my curiosity if this is my impression. And they told me, oh, Jacob, he hates you. How can someone that doesn't know me at all hate me? The answer is it's because he thinks I'm of a certain religion. People are amazing, eh? Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, we were both en route. On our buses, the printers for the receipts won't stop beeping the alarm when the paper roll is out, until you change it. I always have plenty of them with me. We are at the central station when I go out to stretch my legs. He's one position in front of me. Another colleague comes over for a quick hi, so does Jacob running to us. He stands right in front of me, almost face to face, when he ignores my existence completely, and asks the other driver if he has any rolls with him because he is out and goes crazy for 5 minutes. I said nothing. I had 5. He spent the next 10 minutes begging all the others on the radio to give him a printing roll, but no one could help. You hate me for no reason and ignore my existence with the most rude, passive-aggressive way possible? Enjoy 4.5 hours driving with a beep, beep, beep next to your ear. The next story is titled, Let Your Fingers Do the Hosing. This is a third-hand or worse story, and old, but it's cute, so have some dopamine. A woman found out her BF was cheating while he was away for a week on a business trip, so she packed all her things and left. When he returned a week later, he saw the phone sitting loose on the counter and picked it up, to be greeted by a voice giving the weather in Paris. Translation, thousands of dollars in charges. Let your fingers do the walking was a catchphrase for the Yellow Pages back when there were dinosaurs. The next story is titled, Karen Calls 911 After Veteran Steals Her Handicap Spot. She is not disabled. I am a disabled veteran and I'm not ashamed of it. I still like going out and socializing with people. I've got a prosthetic leg, so it doesn't bother me that every now and then I will get stared at. After all, it's mostly little kids, and I am sure they are simply curious. Like I said, most people are exceedingly kind to me and even thank me for serving. The times that I've met someone mean were almost inexistent, except for one Karen. Although I'm still independent, my girlfriend helps me with a lot of things. She was always by my side, and I know that I could count on her no matter what. She's my best friend, and we do everything together. We frequently go grocery shopping, and while to some people that may seem like a chore or what you're supposed to do, I just really appreciated her tagging along for simple stuff. We were on our usual weekend grocery trip, and we were circling the parking lot trying to find a handicapped place to park. Most of the time, the handicapped parking spaces are taken, most of the time by people who don't have any handicap. I also have the placard and all the paperwork because, I want to do what's right and follow the rules. My girlfriend finds a spot and slowly pulls into it, looking left and right a few times. From behind, a car started honking and throwing his hands up. I can swear that I read, "What do you think you're doing?" on his lips. We didn't know what he was going crazy over, so my girlfriend pulled into the space completely. We thought maybe he was trying to park in the space across from us where the car just pulled out, but then he drove down the aisle and parked in the next row from us near the front. At this point, we just think maybe he was honking at the other car or something. I stopped thinking about him the moment he drove past us. My girlfriend insists on helping me get out of the car. I get into the wheelchair, and I see a woman approaching us angrily. She was a Karen. I could tell from the second I saw her. "Aren't you ashamed of yourselves?" Karen asked. I looked at her confused, but that was the moment I realized that she really wanted our parking spot. "What do you want, annoying creature?" I answered, laughing. "You think I'm annoying? At least I don't need someone to push me around every day," she replied, proud, fully. It hurt because she was right. I'm a tough guy. After all, you must be if you're going to serve. But I did have an insecurity about burdening my girlfriend. My girlfriend intervened, saving me from the awkward silence and situation I had just created by not responding. "What do you need, lady?" my girlfriend asked. "You can't talk to anyone like that. You don't even know us," she added. "Well, I'm going to talk however I want to someone who stole my parking spot," Karen shouted. I thought to myself, oh god, so this is where this was going. I tried thinking of something to say, but nothing came to mind. "How did we steal it from you? Were you already parked there?" she asked. I smiled as I heard her because I absolutely loved her reply. Karen looked surprised and shocked, too. You could clearly see that she didn't expect that answer. "Well, no, but I saw it first," she replied. "Well, actually, you turned the corner after us. Besides, you don't even have a handicap placard in your window, so how were we supposed to know that you were going to park there?" I finally got the courage to talk again. "Well, I must go buy a lot of stuff right now. I don't want to have to carry it all the way down to another parking spot. Plus, that one is my favorite. I also park there," she replied. "Lady, that's not how these things work," I said. "Maybe next time do your groceries more often so you don't have a lot to carry." My girlfriend replied, smiling, "Others would like to carry out groceries through the parking lot, but they can't. So be grateful," she added. "So you really want all three of us to waste our time?" "Your groceries would have already been in the car if you wouldn't have done all this show," I said. "I'm going to say it one last time. Go and move your car," Karen said. "Don't make me become something I'm not," she added. When my girlfriend and I heard that last line, we started laughing. "Why are you laughing? You think you're entitled to something just because you weren't careful and lost your leg?" she asked. There was no point in listening to her anymore. She was delirious. She did not want to push her groceries to another parking spot, and yet I was the entitled one. I would kill to be able to walk down a parking lot pushing my groceries. People really do take advantage of things and don't even think twice about it. Besides that, she was wasting all this time being a selfish and entitled Karen for no reason. I would never treat someone like that, especially not a stranger. Well, we go on our way and do our grocery shopping. Karen is shopping around the store when we finish, and she was not shy about sending us dirty looks. Well, when we go out to our car and see her parked in the next aisle over, we also notice that she's parked in a handicapped spot. So I told my girlfriend to pass me my phone because I was going to report him and have her car towed from the parking lot. But before I got to call, I see the police pulling up right next to our car. "Hello, sir, someone called and told us you stole her parking spot," said the policeman. The woman told us that she wanted the parking spot because it's closer to the entrance and she doesn't want to carry her groceries, I politely said. "I'm disabled, as you can see, that's why my girlfriend parked there," I added. "Is the woman disabled?" asked the policeman. "Yes, that woman called you," my girlfriend said, pointing to Karen. "I didn't steal anyone's spot. How is that even possible?" she added. "I don't know. Not that we could see, and she didn't mention anything," my girlfriend replied. Out of nowhere, Karen came smiling. She explained to the policeman a situation that never happened, adding all kinds of details to the story. We told our side of the story, and the policeman talked to the manager and looked at the parking lot security cameras. He saw everything he needed, so he arrested Karen and took her down to the police station. Soon after that, the police called us and confirmed that Karen wasn't disabled, but just lazy disrespectful. The next story is titled, Entitled Ex-Husband Gets What He Deserves. After dealing with my husband, 29M, cheating on me and loudly disrespecting me for 2 years, I, 23F, finally left him 4 months ago. He assumed no responsibility for the marital bills and I had to sell the house and his truck by myself. When I left him, there was also a $400 phone bill in both of our names. I ended up just paying the overdue bill a few months ago under the stipulation that my ex-husband gives me $200 for his share. He did give me $90, but then he laughed at me for expecting him to pay me the other $110, stating that he doesn't owe me anything. About a week ago, I went into the store of my current cell phone provider and learned that I am paying twice as much as I should be paying for phone service because I am still being charged $40 a month for my ex-husband's phone. There's still $800+ owed on it. I learned that the remaining balance was not transferred over when he switched his phone number to his own account because he failed to sign the required paperwork. I explained the situation to my ex-husband, and he was more than willing to join a conference call with me and customer service to get the remaining balance transferred to his own account. We had spent approximately 20 minutes on the phone before my ex-husband told the customer service woman that he is making payments on his own phone through his own account, that he doesn't have a clue what I'm talking about, and that whatever I have called to inquire about is clearly not even his business. Then he hung up. So today, I spoke with customer service again and learned that I technically own my ex-husband's phone since it is in my name. So I made a police report, I reported the phone as stolen, and it is now flagged and shut off. The next story is titled, A Parting Gift for Bad Neighbors. I had some bad neighbors across the street from me. Nothing too serious, just irritating. They would regularly park blocking or partially blocking driveways. Their yard was always a mess. They let their dog run around the neighborhood even though they had a fenced backyard, so everyone had doggy landmines in their yards and dog pee on their car tires. Then came the day they started moving out. Happy dance. They moved over a 2-month period where they vacated the house after about 3 weeks of moving, but kept coming back for the rest of their stuff in the following weeks. Each time they'd move something they wanted and leave a pile of stuff that they didn't want in the driveway to be hauled to the dump on a later day. I had some junk in my basement that I had been meaning to haul to the dump, so one night I took it across the street and added to their pile in the driveway. I loved watching their reaction when they found the extra junk. I figure the dump charges equated my time picking up dog bombs. The next story is titled, Keep Using My Wi-Fi to Party at 2 a.m. when I'm trying to sleep for work. Enjoy the laggy music. I've recently moved out of home into a share house. One of my housemates doesn't work, and finds that 2 a.m. is the perfect time to start partying and blast really bassy music. This expressly happens on weeknights, not weekends. This happened for a few weeks on end, with each night me requesting they turn it down so I can sleep for work. I got frustrated of constantly having to wake up, get out of bed, ask them to turn it down, then spend 10 minutes discussing what an appropriate noise level is, because they thought they were being quiet. Cue petty revenge. I managed to log into my Wi-Fi settings and identify their products: phone, speaker, laptop. Whenever they start now, I either set parental controls for 2 from when they start so that their Wi-Fi works the next day and they can't locate the problem, or I just block their internet access and limit their Wi-Fi speeds. Nothing worse than trying to party and only having 1 megabytes per second download speeds, extremely slow and laggy music. One night they came home at 1:30 a.m. on the phone. When I tell you it sounded like a megaphone was being used, it was ridiculously loud. So I went in and blocked their internet access intermittently so the call would drop out, they would ring back, and as soon as they picked up, disconnect again. Sometimes I disconnect the Wi-Fi just as they begin responding on phone calls so that the other person can't hear them and has to repeat it. It's worth noting that their responses can go from 10 to 15 minutes each, and having to repeat it 3 times has caused visible frustration. They've managed to piss me off so bad that sometimes when they're home and listening to music, I block their Wi-Fi access for 20 minutes just to annoy them. The last story is titled, Playing Idiot Coworker's Game. For a little bit of context, I'm a secretary at a school, and since I get real bored, I finished all my established work for the year in the first trimester. So, on days where nothing else comes up, I just basically have to be there in case it does. You see, while I have nothing to work on, I just keep scrolling my phone and help whoever shows up. But my Karen coworker didn't like that, and decided to throw a hissy fit about it on Friday, so now my boss asked me to stop using my phone. Now, that pisses me off, because this coworker specifically sits on her chair and reads NSFW books the whole ducking day while watching small children, gross to be honest, and hides the covers so we don't see it. Well, I have a whole collection of books I've been wanting to read, and now I'm about to read all day, every day, while making it a point to sit wherever she can see me. I even plan on making a cover to put over them, exactly like the one she uses, and I'll walk into work every ducking day with it on my hands, smiling as the petty bitch I am. Next year, I'll be smarter, not bored, and she will have to find new nonsense complaints to file. Feel free to add to it, babies. I'm down to piss her off in any way. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.